Welcome back to Combat Mission Shock Force 2, where we're going to take a quick look at some Dutch light infantry. This goes hand in hand with the Platoon Patrol series. I'll link the run through that scenario down below when it becomes available. And it should be pretty interesting because this is one of the less conventionally organised platoons. Not just because the immediate impression they give is NATO Technical Swarm, which I suspect is why this unit got the most votes. That's not necessarily wrong, but they're more complicated than that. To begin with, we have 4 squads rather than the usual 3, and the platoon HQ is not a separate entity, it's embedded in the first one. Each squad has 2 4-man fire teams. Of those, the B team is always organised the same way. A team leader with a C7A and AG-36 40mm underbarrel grenade launcher, an anti-tank specialist with a C7A1 and a Panzerfaust 3-IT600, a light machine gunner or automatic rifleman with a C9, also known as the FN Mini-Me, and a basic rifleman with a C7A1. All these weapons fire 5.56 NATO. The C7A1s are all fitted with 3.4 times C79 optics. The Panzerfaust 3-IT600 is a reloadable AT weapon firing 110mm tandem heat warheads out to about 600 meters. In very broad terms, it's similar to the RPG-7 or the Carl Gustav, but it's a more modern iteration with a little fire control computer, night vision, and the ability to be fired indoors safely. In practical terms, it's not a guided weapon like Javelin, but in Shock Force 2 it can reliably take on high-end Syrian armour. Things are a little more complex when we get to the A teams. In the 2nd and 3rd squads, we have a squad leader and a grenadier, both equipped with the C7A1 AG-36 combo, a rifleman, and then a machine gunner carrying an FN mag. The FN mag is a 7.62mm belt-fed general-purpose machine gun, an M240 to the Americans and a GIMP to the Brits. Like the C9, no optics, but the squad leader has some binoculars and can spot for the MG if necessary. The 4th squad's A-team replaces the grenadier with a rifleman and the machine gunner with a marksman carrying the AWSM-F, the Arctic Warfare Super Magnum with a folding stock. This is chambered for 338 Lapua Magnum and has either a 10 times or 2 to 12 times Schmidt & Bender telescopic sight. The first squad is similar, but replaces the squad leader and one of the riflemen with the platoon leader and a radio operator, both of who are armed with C8A1s, which is the carbine version of the C7. Essentially then we have 2 squads with GPMGs and 2 squads with sniper rifles. Each squad can break down into a base of fire team based around either machine gunner or marksman, and an assault team, but the teams are pretty well balanced inside those constraints. In terms of ammunition, each squad carries 2,860 rounds of 5.56, the FN mags get 750 rounds of 7.62, the AWSMs get 35 rounds of Lapua Magnum, and each AG-36 gets 10 40mm high explosive grenades. The Panzerfaust 3 comes with a single 110mm AT rocket. On top of that, each soldier has body armour and night vision, each fire team has a radio and a pair of binoculars. So overall, the rifle squads here are a little bit different than the usual fare, but they have plenty of firepower. Then we add in the vehicles. The platoon rides around in G-Wagens, otherwise known as Geländewagen, or cross-country vehicles. These are a pretty successful 4x4 design from BMW. There are civilian variants. In Shock Force 2 they're not only used by the Dutch, but by the Germans and the Canadians. The Dutch, however, have the most customised variant in CM. They're cut right down to reduce weight, there's a little cage on the back for extra equipment, and there are 2 weapon mounts, a primary pedestal mount on the truck bed behind and in between the 2 front seats, and a secondary mount for the front passenger position. Just like the minor complexities of the rifle squads, there are some minor complexities to the G-Wagens. The basic model, or the MMG version, features an FN mag on the pedestal and a C9 as a secondary weapon. Then we have a HMG variant, which mounts a 50 caliber M2 HMG as primary weapon, backed up by an FN mag for the front passenger. The GMG variants swap the 50 for, shockingly, a GMG. This is not the American Mark 19, instead it's the Heckler & Koch GMG. The HMG and GMG variants carry 500 rounds of 50 caliber armor-piercing incendiary, or 288 40x53mm grenades respectively, with 700 rounds of 7.62 for the secondary FN mag. In the MMG variant, where the FN mag is the primary weapon, the G-Wagons carry 1,000 rounds of 7.62 and 750 rounds of 5.56 for the front passenger C9. Altogether, the platoon is mounted in 8 G-Wagons. The first squad is split between a HMG vehicle and one with a GMG, and second is split between a GMG and an MMG, while third and fourth are both mounted in pairs of MMG vehicles. Overall, that adds up to 150 caliber, 2 GMGs, 8 FN mags and 5 C9s. Again, plenty of firepower. Not necessarily a lot of staying power, they don't have a tremendous amount of ammunition on hand, but certainly enough to get them out of trouble. That is, assuming of course they don't get shredded at the point of contact. The G-Wagons are not armoured, they really cannot take a hit. Even small arms fire is likely to ruin their day, never mind the unprotected squishy humans inside. The primary gunner in particular is stood up and exposed if he's manning his weapon. It is a fast mobile vehicle, 363 points on the vehicle mobility test, which is really, really good. Either the G-Wagon got very lucky in the ground test, or it has a pretty impressive power to weight ratio. That's tactically useful, though as a wheeled vehicle it's going to do best on rather than off-road. Where the Dutch might start to come unstuck is how the vehicles and dismounts interact, at least in a combat mission context. There are 4 seats per G-Wagon, driver, commander, gunner and passenger. Each squad is 8 men strong, meaning that the only way to mount them up is to split them into 2 4-man teams. That in turn means that we can't dismount and man the vehicles at the same time. In theory, we could dismount a squad, recombine it, then detach a 2-man scout team to man one of the 2 G-Wagons, but that is A, complex and time consuming, and B, takes the flexibility out of the dismounts who are now stuck in a 6-man blob. On the one hand, there are some restrictive CM-isms going on here. On the other, you definitely need at least 2 men to operate each vehicle. Whichever way you cut that, it's half a fire team. If you want to keep all 8 vehicles manned, you're going to be using up 16 of the 32 soldiers in the platoon, which is pretty prohibitive. So it looks like the Dutch light infantry are supposed to operate mounted, operate dismounted, or find some kind of balance, whether that's at squad level with one fire team going on foot and the other supporting from the G-Wagon, or if it's at platoon level with some squads staying in their vehicles and others getting out. Whichever way you cut it, you're going to have empty vehicles hanging around and it's going to feel a bit awkward. A secondary but no less potentially problematic feature of the G-Wagons being quite small is the amount of extra ammo they carry for the dismounts. All the different variants only carry 400 rounds of 7.62 and 500 rounds of 5.56. Granted, the infantry do carry a lot of ammunition themselves, but it feels somewhat underwhelming compared to the amount that you usually find in something like a Striker. Each vehicle does carry an extra Panzerfaust 3 and 2 more AT rockets though, so you could feasibly have 3 Panzerfausts per squad for a total of 12. They might not be guided or have a lot of ammo, but that's a surprising amount of anti-tank capability. So, that's a quick once-over of Dutch Light Infantry Platoon TOE as modelled in Shock Force 2. In a lot of ways this feels more like a cavalry or reconnaissance unit than an infantry platoon. There's a lot of tension between staying mounted and going on foot. Staying in the G-Wagons means retaining mobility and firepower. Even the more lightly armed MMG vehicles have the same number of machine guns as a whole squad, but they don't have a massive amount of ammo and they're really very vulnerable. The dismounts, meanwhile, aren't exactly poorly armed. They can operate much more flexibly and take advantage of the terrain in ways that vehicles can't. It seems like the expected use is for the platoons to advance to contact mounted, blast their way out of trouble with the firepower on the G-Wagons, then get out and either conduct a dismounted attack or go firm and call up support. Really very recon-esque. Regardless, they're a really interesting unit and I'm looking forward to putting them through their paces. Hope you all enjoyed this video. If you'd like to see future videos early and support the channel, you can do so via Patreon and YouTube memberships. Whether you do or not, thanks for watching and I'll catch you in the next one.